We've got Bruce Feldman here from Fox Sports and The Athletic here on our program. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
So I'm on pins and needles. I'm sensing today's Harbaugh day, one way or another. What do you think? What do you think right now?
I don't know about today, but I would be very surprised if he's not an NFL head coach. Just everything seems like it's pointing in that direction. From what I did hear, that like the interviews apparently have gone pretty well.
Yes,
at least that's how his camp feels about it.
We're hearing, money's not an issue, that the Chargers are ready to cough up, not just for him, but what he would want his staff to be paid and everything else that you pointed out that needs to go along with his program, from whatever it is, strength conditioning and smoothie making or whatever the heck it is.
Man, if you're a Michigan fan, I think that the bigger blow, obviously, if Jesse Minter, who did a terrific job as a DC,
I think he's gone too.
Yeah,
I think so too.
The one I would be like, oh, please don't take Ben Herbert. That's the one. Like, that's the strength guy there who Jim brought. He was old Bielema guy, Wisconsin, then Arkansas. Like, that guy's as good as it gets. Mm-hmm. And when you look at them not like quote having the recruiting stars of the other elite teams to win a national title, it was the development part, and that guy. Man, they can't pay him enough money. So.
Well, I mean, we'll see what Michigan does to keep whomever from going with Jim and things of that nature. I don't know. And maybe Jim is still considering staying. That this may just be, you heard how the Broncos thought they had him. He thought that he had the Vikings and then didn't. So,
you never know, especially with Jim Harbaugh. You really never know.
I'm telling you, that's what I said at the top of the show. Like, everybody who I talk to that might know from the Chargers, and everyone that I talk to that might know from Michigan, finishes their entire soliloquy or theory or this is what's happening type statement with Jim. You never know.
You never know. Now, I know his wife liked Southern California from her time there. Right. You have a franchise quarterback that's waiting there, like a big athletic guy. Some really good players on defense. Just like there's a lot to work with for the Chargers, especially. Obviously the Falcons would have, no quarterback. I don't know if that would be attractive to go say, hey, all right, well, I can bring in J.J. McCarthy and move up to get him if I believe he's that guy. I don't know. But man, the Chargers feel like they're moving into new facilities this year, not far from us.
Right down the road, across the street practically.
Andrew Whitworth could probably hit a golf ball through it.
Tee it up and let it fly. What would a coaching search at Michigan look like with Harbaugh gone? Is it just as simple as Sharon Moore, here's a new contract?
I think it is. And I wrote about this on The Athletic the other day, the only thing that I think could give them a little hesitation is if there's anything that's been uncovered related to the NCAA investigations. I don't think that's going to be something that will be a deterrent. I could see them saying, hey, it's Michigan, we're going to do a full coaching search. But ultimately, again, this is something I wrote a lot about, was Sharon Moore not only has beaten Penn State at Penn State, he beat your arch rival. Like, there's no interim who could have proven more than Sharon Moore has under intense pressure and scrutiny in tough environments, and he aced those tests. The other thing was, and I got into this in the story about him, after the national title, it's an hour later, and I'm talking to Trevor Keegan, who's a team captain, not about what if Harbaugh leaves, any of this. We were talking about something about like kind of the brotherhood of him and some of the linemen and some of the guys he came in with, unprompted. And he starts talking about how, the recruiting process, how jaded that could be. And when he was a freshman and he did not basically stopped loving football, going in, kind of had this feelings about going into Schembechler Hall when he was a young player and everything in the building. And then all of a sudden he goes, Sharon Moore, basically made him love football again and completely flipped everything for him. I didn't ask him about Sharon Moore. He wasn't talking about him, I think, in terms of like, this is why Sharon Moore should be the next head coach at Michigan. But I think that's probably why he should be, because, as much as we want to say that, oh, these bigger programs aren't totally developmental programs, they absolutely are. They're all college football programs or developmental programs. Harbaugh was masterful at that. And I think Sharon Moore has shown he is very able and wired to do that. And so if it's not going to be Sharon Moore, man, it better be a grand slam choice. Like the other guys, I'd say the only other guy I would think of and say, okay, that guy's pretty remarkable head coach, but he has no ties to Michigan, is Lance Leipold at Kansas. Like, I think he's done an amazing job at a place nobody wins at. And he's from Wisconsin, so he has, Big Ten footprint, growing, coming from where he came from. But he's still not you're talking about a complete outsider. Anybody else they're bringing out, like I've had some people throw the name, Brian Kelly. I'm like, the stuff that made Jim Harbaugh such a great coach at Michigan, when you talk to people, it's like the connection he has with the players. Jim Harbaugh is Jim Harbaugh. He may be wildly unpredictable. He may be very different, but like there's an authenticity that the players and the people in there totally buy in on. Bringing in Brian Kelly after the guy who's totally authentic and that lands with people and resonates with them, it seems like you'd almost have the polar opposite. Where you'd have a salesman component to it.
Are you saying Brian Kelly would not pronounce the word family differently when he?
How do they say it in
well, but he would know. I mean, he was a former Central coach.
And not only that, he was at Lake Superior State for a long time. In the area as well. I mean, he's got deep ties around the Midwest. He's recruited at a high academic school, for a long time at Notre Dame. But I just think that Sharon Moore is such an obvious choice for them and for the players and the program. And there's a lot of key pieces I think you could probably keep. And there's still a lot of really good young players there. So to me, it's like that would surprise me if they didn't end up promoting him.
Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show, Fox Sports and The Athletic. In the meantime, Jim Harbaugh has made a ton of other people money. By that, I mean beating Alabama, Nick Saban retires, which he probably would have done anyway.
Okay.
But I'm ascribing this to Jim Harbaugh because Nick Saban retires. Dan Lanning makes a killing, right? Mike Norvell makes a killing.
Yeah.
All right. Sarkisian makes a killing, right?
Yes.
Okay. DeBoer
Yes.
makes a killing. I'm assuming Jed Fish got a raise to go to Washington.
Oh, my God, yeah, I'm sure Jed Fish.
And the others who are making a killing are Ohio State Buckeye players. I'm reading to you a headline from the Wall Street Journal today. Michigan won a title. This school spent millions to make sure it never happens again. And that's Ohio State.
Yeah.
How much money have they spent from what you're hearing?
It's a great question. I know that for them to get Caleb Downs, who to me is as talented a defensive player in the country, was a phenomenal freshman player, a safety, who, the people I talked to who faced him were awestruck by what he was able to do in that defense as a true freshman coming in, just a phenomenal talent. Everybody thought he was going to Georgia. Ohio State was able to win that recruiting battle. I suspect it probably did not come cheap.
Julian Sand, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's from Calabasas, not that, I don't say like down the road, but a Southern California kid. When I went to the Elite 11 this summer, he was a revelation. He was so good, so impressive, was headed to Alabama. And then in this change now, he's at Ohio State. Their quarterback room is going to be really interesting because they have another Elite 11 kid who's got a really big arm, who's talented, Aaron Nolan. They have Will Howard they took from Kansas State, who led them to the Big 12 title game to the Big 12 championship. Is an experienced quarterback, plus Devin Brown, who started their bowl game and then got hurt. That's a lot. And then on top of it, you add Ryan Day is no longer going to be the guy running the offense. He brought in Bill O'Brien, and we'll see how that works.
Well, isn't that a firewall for him when if he doesn't perform very well again, if the team underperforms in the mind's eye of the fan base to say, hey, don't blame me, I'm not calling the plays?
No, that's not going to work.
Look, Bill O'Brien is as top-notch as you can get, for a resume, obviously, from coaching and what have you. But I'm just returning to the original question here because it's just fascinating to me. A program that once upon a time got smacked down because of some silliness over tattoos,
right, is
now in a day and age spending what is possibly, the Wall Street Journal is clearly making it, apparent here, potentially 8 figures of money to give to players, legally, clearly, through the manner of which our world exists in college football. Like, we're now seeing that part of college football changed to me.
I think it's become more of a front burner subject because I think there's more, Georgia thought they were getting Caleb Downs. They didn't. He ended up at Ohio State. There's certain, Quinshon Judkins was a terrific running back who couldn't leave yet for the NFL because he's only been in college 2 years.
Yes.
Left Ole Miss, where they are very, not just very invested in NIL, but I feel like that organization has really figured it out of how to make it work, What
do you mean? Because I'm shocked you would say that, since a JUCO transfer showed up in a yellow Lamborghini to sign his papers with Ole Miss.
I think, yeah,
it's kind of crazy. I mean, seriously, I'm just.
But this is a different day and age, because a couple of years ago, I remember, and this, I don't want to make this as like this is only Ohio State.
No,
but a couple of years ago, like Travion Henderson, great running back. I think he was a true freshman at the time, freshman, and. They have a car dealership, and he is with, what looks, it's, I don't know, $70,000 SUV. And this is not like, plenty of high-level players have some kind of NIL component with car dealerships and everything, and that's acceptable. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that gets, and I could be doing this in a 5-minute segment of conflating, okay, they're paying this as a recruiting inducement as opposed to they're rewarding this as part of an NIL program. There's a lot of stuff that has now been put under this umbrella, and I think that the programs and the schools that are the most organized about it, and again, I think Ole Miss has become proactive. They've gotten some really good players to go, especially from one kid was a really good edge rusher who was at Florida and now is at Ole Miss. Walter Nolan, who is as highly rated a defensive lineman, has come out of high school in the last few years, was at Texas A&M. Now they have upgraded the roster considerably because one of the people who runs their collective was a former Walker Jones, former CAA agent who then worked for Under Armour, but also former Ole Miss player. In retrospect, I think if you were to said, if you were an AD or who would you want to be in that position I'm like, man, that would kind of be the profile. A guy who played there, a guy who understands the business world, the sports business world, and who understands the culture. I think those are the things that we're starting to see go into those directions, as opposed to some random money guy who may have been the guy who was the under the table guy 7 years ago for some recruit.
The local Buddy Garrity, so. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the, co-chairs, for the lack of a better phrase, I don't know if this is the exact title, of Ohio State's collective is Cardell Jones. And they announced that C.J. Stroud made a significant major contribution to the collective.
What could be better than that if you're an Ohio State person? C.J. Stroud was I'm not saying you're critical of it.
No, trust me, I'm not being critical. It's because I do want to also say, players deserve their money. I mean, I'm watching this because of the players, the Jimmies and Joes, right? And it seems like the guys who draw up the X's and O's can get to go wherever the heck they want. They can coach in a national championship game one minute and then start wearing a script A the next. And that's Kalen DeBoer's worked his ass off to come out of South Dakota to be Alabama's head coach. So I'm not criticizing or I guess saying you shouldn't have when it comes to the players at all. I'm just saying, where are the rules? And I wouldn't blame Jim Harbaugh, who seems to have cracked a code here, to basically say, I'm going to go to the pros where I know when free agency starts. I know when I can talk to a free agent. I know how much the free agent's going to make. I know what the cap is. I know what my capologist is going to do. And I know I can't speak to a player or have them in the building until April this. I mean, there's rules.
Right.
There's actual rules and contracts and unions. And that's where, this sport needs to go, clearly, Bruce. And I guess that's my long-winded way of setting up. Is this the stuff that I'm also hearing Nick Saban wants to fix or lead on this? I'm still looking for the leader to try and figure out where are the guardrails here, man.
Good luck on that, because it's still so evolving. Like all the stuff we just talked about, and I thought about this with Stroud especially because, he's a Southern California kid, went there and really blossomed And, you know, like if I was Ohio State, and I'm not saying they're not doing this, but I was like, especially now, I mean, he's been a phenomenal first season, you know, and did all this amazing stuff. Has been really good in front of the camera on top of it. Like, these are the things that you should be not embracing, right? And not just celebrating, embracing. And I wonder, though, is like, what took them so long to kind of get it sorted out?
Because everyone's doing it for the first time, I think. You know what I mean? Like, this could be a template. Like, I don't know how many programs are reaching out to their stars in the NFL who are, you know, making a killing on this on a second overall contract.
LSU wins the national title when Joe Burrow is the quarterback 4 years ago. And I remember it was Odell Beckham Jr. is like literally throwing cash around after the game. And it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Whatever,
I mean,
right?
we talked about that with Patrick Queen a couple weeks ago when he zoomed in. And I asked him, like, you know, Odell's your teammate now, huh? Were you one of the guys who put a few $100, you know, put some money in? He laughed. He's like, basically, was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, even today.
There is a guy you work with over on the NFL side who was a great receiver at Miami.
Yes.
You should ask, pick his brain and say...
Let me look at who I work with. I don't know who you're referring to.
Pick his brain on this. Like, you want to talk about, like, Ohio State's had 3 miserable years of like incredible success. Yet on the other hand,
yes,
we know the elephant in the room. Go ask somebody, like, you have all these Miami guys in terms of, like, it has been a dark, it's like 20 years or whatever it is, where other programs, because that is a place that did not have the kind of boosters. The one booster they had was not even like a Miami, you know, booster guy. He jumped in and then ended up, you know, with a Ponzi scheme, and they got in a lot of trouble for it.
I think I saw 30 for 30 on that, right? I don't know, but okay.
But the point of it is, like, there's a lot of programs that could leverage this stuff if they can get it figured out. And I think the challenge is for them to get it figured out, to get the egos in the right place. When I say the egos, I mean the collective egos, like the people who are running it. USC has 3 collectives. I think there's a lot of probably well-intentioned people that are all kind of, you know, kicking each other in the Achilles along the way. Ohio State has 2 different collectives. Like, I think it's not uncommon for that, but it's like, this is the level of dysfunction. I think before we get to the part that you were asking about, where the leadership and where are the rules and where are the guardrails, because the guardrails question has come up for 4 years now. But it's like, now there's different. Before, what happened, and it's interesting the timing of this, because just in the last few days it's come to light that the University of Florida is under investigation for a quarterback recruit who they, you know, initially were going to offer $13 million for. And then the NIL contract completely fell apart. It was completely dysfunctional in terms of dysfunctional on the agent side of what he was working with, and dysfunctional on the Florida collective side. And there was, you know, maybe there's some really dubious things that had gone on there. The kid ended up, you know, signing with Arizona State, but Florida is now getting investigated for it. And I think what happened back then, which is not that long ago, it was 2 years ago, was the collective people were taking the old model, throwing money at high school recruits, where the hit percentage of how good those kids end up being is still pretty slight. It's maybe 25% in that ballpark, as opposed to now the money people have figured out, let's go throw the money at transfers, because those guys are proven. It's way different to have high school film than it is to have college film. You know, there's no way, barring an injury, Caleb Downs is not going to be a great player at Ohio State. The kid who's in high school, who is thought to be really good, there's a lot of those guys who end up being disappointing.
That's the crapshoot, I guess. I'm just saying, you know, I don't have a problem with the kids making money at all. I just don't know if I'm ready. Maybe I need to get ready. Not how much the kids make. That the teams, these programs that have the best collectives, are going to be the ones that succeed the most. It doesn't matter about facilities, doesn't matter about school, doesn't matter about recruiting acumen, doesn't matter about the X's and O's. It's just that if you get the collective part down right now, you now win more than those who don't have the collective part down. And there's no rules essentially about the collective significantly that everyone can play by the same standard.
Some of that stuff, though, Rich, was happening underneath the table with recruiting
exactly.
for years.
I understand that. When it was about recruiting, it's about, how much was in the paper bag underneath the table. I understand that, and it's more out in the open now, which is cool. I'm just waiting for the rules. A preview of what you're going to write on The Athletic. This quarterback prospect is the most polarizing for scouts to identify as a professional at the next level.
To see where they think he goes. Some people think he is a top, could be a first-round quarterback. Okay. Some people think he may not get drafted.
What? May not get drafted?
And
his name is?
His name is Michael Penix Jr.
He may not get drafted in some scouts' minds?
The concern for some people is going to come back to the medical piece, because he did have 4 season-ending injuries. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, that's going to be what the doctors say them. But then there's other parts of this where people are like, I don't think we have a 3rd-round grade on him based on some of what they look. And this guy, if you watch the Texas game in the semifinal, was spectacular. I mean, he puts up big stats, but it's not like he's dinking and dunking to big stats and letting the receivers and running backs run for tons of yards. I mean, he's taking shots down the field, throws into tight windows.
And not just that, Bruce. I'm watching the national championship game. Michigan hardly could lay a finger on him sometimes. Because he was so quick to get rid of it. And also I mentioned this before, so it's not name dropping, even though it sounds it. Marshall Faulk was watching the game, at our house, and he was marveling at his pre-snap identification abilities, just his neck up ability. And Marshall is the smartest football player I've ever been around. So if he's praising that part of his game, the brain part of his game, the identification pre-snap, then this guy is an all-timer when it comes to that.
That's a hell of a statement for Marshall Faulk, because I know you've been around a lot of
You should speak to him. I'll hook you up with him. I mean, if you need that help. I mean, honestly, he was talking about how Penix was clearly pre-snap seeing it really well, and how he could see. And Michigan has got like a pro-type
that's
defense.
The thing. That was
out.
one of the people I talked to said Michigan is as close to an NFL defense as he saw. Mm-hmm. And he said, whereas Texas was much more vanilla for what he was seeing, Michigan gave him more challenges to sort it out and figure and feel comfortable where he's going with the ball and everything like that. The part of the story for me is, I think, and I talked to both Bucky and DJ for this story too, mm-hmm. and they're great resources, obviously, for stuff like this. But it is the part about where I am a big Penix believer. What you said is definitely true. I think because there's tighter windows in the NFL. I go back to something back when Mike Evans and Johnny Manziel were down training in San Diego. Cam Cameron came out one day to help George Whitfield and Kevin O'Connell there. And I remembered Cam Cameron was talked about NFL Open compared to College Open. Yeah. And he's right in front of me. And I knew Cam a little before that, but I was like, oh, it's Crest. I can tell the toothpaste, because he was that close.
Sounds like Hoosiers. It's Dentine.
He was like, right. This is NFL Open, and he started, he was really fun to talk to about that, because he had at one point Anquan Bolden, but in college he had Jarvis Landry, and he was like, these are guys who are essentially almost power forwards, how they can operate in this tight space.
Sure. Rome Odunze might not be too far off.
No, and he had 3 elite college receivers, right? But Rome Odunze is probably a top 10, top 5 kind of player, but he trusted them, and he did a lot of, he made a lot of big plays with them because he gave them chances. But also, I thought the biggest thing that I really like about him is he has faced real adversity in his career and his life, and came out the other side and thrived from it. And the thing you wonder about with a lot of quarterbacks who come into the NFL at a college is how much adversity have they really faced, and what happened when they faced it. Whereas this guy, he's been very, when we talked in the off season, he was very candid about it. Surprised me how candid he was about some of the adversity he had been dealing with or had dealt with, and came through the other side. And I think there is something to really be said for the guys who have dealt with it and come through it, how they've come through it, you know. And I think there's certain kinds of adversity. Like when I watch Lamar Jackson, the thing, like there's so much stuff you can get awed by, but there is something to be said for the guy who, you know, I remember the Bill Polian quote about, you know, like
he's still saying that stuff.
And you're like, man, this guy is the franchise, right? And no knock, I mean, like Zay Flowers been, you know, like there's been good pieces around him, right? But you look at him like, holy cow. I feel like for a long time he was like underrated because of what he does. But you're also seeing a guy who has been doubted a lot, you know, even before when he got to Louisville there.
Right.
You know,
and even look at him now. By the way, our radio audience is about to go away. Check out Bruce Feldman's article on in the Athletic about this on Thursday. Still here, so finish your sentence.
Yeah, I just think that you know, there's something to be said for these guys who have come through the other side, and then it really does become the strength. You know, it's like the weakness that turns into a strength.
No doubt. I mean, that's what football's about at any level, right? Is that adversity's going to hit.
Like Goff was a 1-win quarterback when he was at Cal at first, right?
Goodness.
And
now look at him.
No, but then obviously you saw how that was probably a gut punch. He loved it being out here, and then he gets traded away, and then the other team wins the Super Bowl without me. And now you watch, like, I'm a Lions fan because of Goff. I can say this because I don't cover the NFL like that, but like, you know, I definitely root for them in part because of him. But you see the parts of like how they push through and a lot of times people will manufacture that, it's us against I'm not saying that was the Michigan thing, you know, like that.
No, I know. Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said for the ones, because a lot of times guys don't. And there was some quarterbacks I've talked to who said, you know, when I got injured and I had this and I didn't know how to deal with it.
And there comes Penix. I can't believe somebody's even saying he shouldn't even be drafted.
Well, I think the question on that is
the medical.
Yeah, that's the.
Well, we're going to find that out.
We're going to find out. It's going to be a yes or no. That is exactly it.
And I will hear, I believe, within 5 minutes of being off the plane about something like that. That's the sort of thing that usually gets out there in the ether. Great to have you here, Bruce Feldman. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.